Dows. I attend E-town BIC Church, and I had been on staff as Minister of Visitation and Care for almost 12 years, and I just retired about a month and a half ago. And so that's a little bit about where I came from. Prior to being on staff, I did a lot of visitation. I think for maybe like 5 years, I went around and visited seniors and women, because we only had male pastors on staff at the time. So if a woman went in the hospital or needed attention, they called me and I would go and do that. How I got started into visiting people, I went to a viewing of an elderly gentleman, and when I went through the line and came up to Dorothy, the widow, I said, "Dorothy, I'm here for you." And she looked me in the eye and she said, "I know you are, and I'm counting on it." And that hit me. Okay, I'm not just saying these words, I'm going to be there for Dorothy. So I told myself that I would visit Dorothy once a month for the first year after her husband died, because that's in 1 year's time, you have the first of everything, the first birthday, the first whatever holiday. So, but of course after that year was finished, I didn't stop, and I actually continued to visit Dorothy until she passed sometime later. And also during that time, I realized, well, I'm aware of Dorothy. There has to be a lot of other people out there who are lonely, who need a friend or a companion, someone to walk beside them. So I started visiting some other people, and I realized that I didn't feel that I had the tools that I needed in helping situations. So I believe I have the gift of mercy, and so I'm drawn to people in hard situations. That's how I feel called to help. So I started taking some classes, and just eventually ended up on staff. And even before being on staff, though, I did oversee what is called our senior visitation ministry. And so everyone in our congregation who is either a shut-in, I guess mostly shut-ins, or a senior, who's just really lonely, they have an assigned visitor, and that visitor goes to visit them once a month. And a really neat story, and I don't know if that's something that your church is looking to do, but it takes the load off of staff. But a neat story. So one of our elderly gentlemen ended up having a double leg amputation because of diabetes. And so he had to go to Masonic Village Skilled Care, and his wife remained in the home, but she never learned to drive. She didn't feel comfortable coming to church without her husband. We offered her rides, and she just didn't want to do that. And so another woman at church asked me if I had somebody that could use a visitor, and so I paired these two women up, and they were immediate friends, and they weren't even of the same generation. And Berna was the visitor. So I had said earlier, once a month is what we ask. She went twice a week. She went every Sunday after church and took her mail, and at that time we were having our sermons. There was an outline that you would fill the answers in as you go along. So she'd give Peg her filled out outline, and then the other time that she would visit her during the week, she would take her in to see her husband. Then she'd go around and visit different people at Masonic Village that are from our church, and then come back and visit with the couple, and then take her back home. And I think that went on for about 2 years, and then Verna got sick, and she was diagnosed with stage 4 liver cancer. And so then the tables turned where Peg was calling Verna every day and sending her cards every week. And then eventually we found a way to get Peg to be able to visit Verna at home. But what was really neat was to see these two women interact. You know, they called each other best friends, even though they really only knew each other for 2 years. They didn't know each other before the visitation started. And just to see these two women cry when they saw each other, and hug, and just love to be with each other. So it's neat when those types of things really do work out. And so I don't know what your experience is with doing any type of visitation. When I was first assigned to visit people in the hospital, and people that I didn't know, that was kind of frightening to me. And so the one that sticks out in my mind was an elderly gentleman, and he just, every time I saw him at church, he just looked so gruff, you know, and he just had this scowl on his face. And it's like, okay, he's in the hospital.
Just described a lot of us.
So he's in the hospital, and I was asked to visit him. And so, of course, what do? I pray. I ask God to help me, to go with me, just to give me whatever I need for that visit. And it was wonderful. He was appreciative. You know, it just went so much better than I had been anticipating. And I can honestly say, and I've done a lot of visits, I have never felt that God didn't go with me on a single visit. He was always there.
Amen.
And he is faithful. I'm not faithful. I don't deserve him. Why in the world would he accompany me on these visits? Because he loves me, and he loves me. So, just a little bit about confidentiality as well. So if you're visiting people and they're bearing their heart to you, that has to remain in confidence unless they're going to hurt themselves or hurt someone else. I've heard some things that, you know, took everything I had from my jaw not to drop down, but, you know, people are perceptive, and they are reading you just as you are reading them. And we'll get into a little bit more about posture and how to be with people. And then again, take your cues. I don't know how you're going to set things up, but take your cues from the pastoral staff. I remember when an 18-year-old girl was diagnosed with leukemia, and from the day she was diagnosed until she passed, it was 1 week. She had just graduated from high school, and she was in her first semester of college. And it was almost, one of our pastors had to kind of keep people back. You know, people care and they want to help, but yeah, too many phone calls. I know when I broke my foot a long time ago, and the visitation minister at that time called me and asked me if I needed anything, and I said, yes, I need my phone to stop ringing. You know, so I appreciated it, but you know, you want to be mindful of what people's needs are. So I have a handout. Because at the top, I'm going to give you a guarantee, okay? And you will have a powerful and meaningful visit. That is my guarantee. So under the guarantee, there's a couple places you can fill in, and that is to never underestimate what God can do through a human encounter. Yes, never underestimate what God can do through a human encounter. And I'm an introvert. So it's pretty easy for me to do some of these things. As I had already said, I believe I have the gift of mercy. And there are times that I will receive a card or somebody will tell me that I said just the right thing. And I think, I did not. I know I did not. But what they heard was God speaking. Whether it's through the prayer or whatever, I'm very confident that I did not say just the right thing, but they heard the right thing because that's what they needed and it was provided by God. So my spiritual care job description, and these are the things, if you do, these things that come with the guarantee, and you can see that they spell out the word help. Hear what the person is saying by listening attentively. God can do so much through our listening to someone else share what's going on in their lives. And this then tells us how to pray when God prompts us to. Thomas Hart said, to listen with an attentive and receptive heart until that person is finished is to bestow a gift of great value. To listen with an attentive and receptive heart until that person is finished is to bestow a gift of great value. It is very therapeutic for people to talk. It's not counseling. You can steer or guide if you see something, but your role is to listen. It's caring, taking time with someone to hear them, to not interrupt them when they're sharing. While we may want to share something about ourselves that, we've gone through something similar, that needs to be very brief because it's not about ourselves, it's about them. So when someone has a chance to share from their heart, I believe that is holy ground. Somehow God is present and at work in it. And I know that firsthand. I had a pastor that because of my visitation, it was before I was on staff, I met with him once a month, just for like a spiritual checkup. And he did exactly what I'm talking about. He listened to me, and I just felt like so much better when I left his office. He listened, and I think when people have these things, especially if they're going through a difficult time, when they have these things rolling around in their head, but they haven't put them to words, once they put them to words and speak those words out, they can hear if anything's faulty or wrong. It's like, you go home and you think, really? Did I say that? That doesn't make sense at all. So I think it's a way, just by sharing, to be able to clean up your own inner thoughts. So that's the first one. H, hear what the person is saying. Empathize with what the person is saying. Empathy is feeling another's problems as if they were your own without actually taking them on yourself. Empathy can help bring relief to someone in pain. people share with us because they hope we will understand. We must do so without condemnation. Again, we can gently challenge and move them in a certain direction, but we want to continue to communicate their value and our understanding. And helping is a delicate balance. While we care and we love and we emphasize, we cannot take on those problems ourselves. We need to remain level-headed. I actually, before anything that I've talked about tonight, so before I even started visiting Dorothy, I was drawn to a woman who I knew was depressed, and I wanted to be a friend and help her. And you know, I've heard this several times from other people too. You know, once you get to know me, you're not going to want to be around me. So somebody who already has a bad self-image or have opened up to people and then they turn away. But I would say that I got into a codependent relationship. This person would call me at different times. They would talk about wanting to kill themselves. I know I called 911 already for her, and I felt responsible, and that's what we can't do. I was not responsible for her state of being. Yes.
So what should you have done? You said you called 911 and
Yeah.
you said you didn't want to be responsible. So what
Right.
should you have done?
No, that was
That
the
part,
right thing
that
to
one-
do.
okay, that part was
I
all right?
meant
Right.
responsible for her spirituality.
Oh, okay.
Responsible for her emotional well-being. Just like I felt like I needed to fix her, or she needed me to fix her. And so when I realized that this was happening, I really, really tried to turn her
Toward the
towards
Lord?
God.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I had done that all along, and I realized that it felt like she wanted me more than my friendship and my availability, more than she wanted God. And so that's just, you know, I feel like I became too involved with her situation.
Personally instead of spiritually. To kind of.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's the best way that you found, with all the different kind of visitations you've done, like some of the people that, you know, we visit in the hospital have had a significant problem of some kind, and it is really easy to become sad and
Attached.
depressed and not even attached, just your emotions you're very affected by what you've just seen or talked with, you know, you take it with you.
Right.
How do you not take it with you? How do you not just exist in that? Is there a way you found that kind of help you shed some of that?
It's tough.
Yeah, I don't know that I would have a way. I mean, I know there's times I came home from a visit and I just curled up in a ball, and like I couldn't do anything. Like for an hour, maybe an hour and a half, I was, yeah. But I think too, like when you see more and more of the same thing.
You build up kind of resistance to that emotional
Yeah.
thing.
I don't know if I ever want to get to that part.
Yeah.
I have empathy,
Right.
and I feel people's pain, and I absorb that pain. But when I leave, the pain stays there, and I go on with my life. But they know at that time while I'm there, I'm giving
Right.
them 100%.
Right. Yes.
And I don't want to build a wall up.
No.
No.
Yeah. And I think that's with taking it home. You know,
Yeah.
like when I took it home, I had to curl up and just, and that was
Crying's
probably.
okay, right? You can sit with the person if they're just a shattered mess.
Yeah, you can cry
You
with them.
can get involved and hold them and say you're loved and God loves you more. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's not breaking a barrier or anything,
No,
right? Okay.
no,
Because
not at all.
I do that, and
I'm sure that's appreciated. People want to know that you care.
And there's a fine line there too, I think, about touching. Some people are really frail, you know what I mean? So,
Right.
if you're gonna give them a hug or anything, you gotta be like really careful
Yeah,
and.
yeah, and I'll get into that, and we can talk about that too. And that would fall more into the love, but we can talk about it now because it was brought up. So I think touch is important, but I mean, I know Nick and I both know someone at E-bic who does not like to be hugged.
Not just one, there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Now there's more than ever.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so, give me up.
you know, but when you're praying with someone, you know, and even in the hospital, I don't want to get sick. I don't want to get someone sick. I go in, I sanitize my hands. I am very careful even doing that. You know, I've already held on to someone's blanketed toe and prayed from the end of the bed when I prayed with them. I was touching them. They knew my hand was there, but we were far away. We weren't skin on skin. So, you know, and like you said, if someone's frail, yeah, you want to kind of, if you're going to give a hug, it's that fake,
Yeah.
fakeish one.
no.
But they know what's in your heart, even if you're not physically hugging them.
You always ask for permission too.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
one thing I will try to
Right.
do is just, is it
Right.
okay if I put my hands on you? Is it okay if I hold your hands, like if you go to pray with somebody? And like Masonic homes, there's a couple places where, what are they called, Tony? The places where, if they're contagious.
Infectious.
Yeah. Well, just pay attention to the signs if you're going to one of those
Yes.
places. And then before you go in the room, ask a staff member in the hallway, is there any
They
reason I
usually
shouldn't
do.
touch? And that kind of thing. Just ask those kind of questions.
So any other questions before we move on about anything that we've been talking about? So empathize. A Christian helper, where is this? Yes, okay. A Christian helper is like a reflector. Reflecting, summarizing, and clarifying what he or she hears. And so these are just some skills that you'll want to be able to have. Reflecting content. Oh, so your family's moving next spring. Or reflecting feelings, if you're picking up on how you think they're feeling, if they're feeling pleased, amazed, nervous, upset, angry, frustrated. Wow, it sounds like you're really frustrated about how that turned out. You know, try and give them the information that they're giving you back to make sure that you're understanding, and it lets them know that you are listening as well. And then also reflecting spiritual concerns. It feels like you're really feeling different from God or distant from God right now. So reflecting is giving feedback to them. And then L, love the person you are visiting. Love is a verb. So one way to show love is to be a companion, to go the journey with someone, which is what I did with Dorothy. I didn't take her situation home with me. I loved her while I was there. I empathized with her. So we would share things, and then her mind started to go, but that was the first that I realized. Here she is, she's in a home, her husband's passed away, and she's still giving me prayer requests for her 4 children. So that's when I realized, okay, this parenting thing, it never stops. But yeah, with Dorothy, I'd go to visit her, and if it was time to go to exercise class, I'd just go along to exercise class. We'd sit in our chairs and do our arm motions. We just had fun together. So Albert Camus said, "Do not walk behind me, I may not lead. Do not walk in front of me, I may not follow. Just walk beside me and be my friend." So we already talked about the touch. Okay, so the last one is P for prayer, and that is the most important part, and that's where I do most of my talking during a visit. I mean, that's, if I've been listening, and if you're with an introvert that isn't saying much, it's going to be a bit of a shorter visit, but, you can try and draw them out a little bit. So if I've been an attentive, non-judgmental listener, my prayer will flow out of all that's happened during the first part of the visit. So I see so I was actually saying that in the beginning, I saw you all writing. So yes, if I have been an attentive listener, I have heard the person's heart as well, what their concerns, fears, and hopes are.
Their hopes, what?
What their concerns, fears, and hopes are. So I've heard their heart, and then it's the best part of the visit because I know that God is directing my prayers, and He's answering them according to His will. But when I start out with prayer, I usually start by thanking God for the person. I thank Him for the things that I know about them. If I know who their family members are, what their gifts are. I thank God for everything that I can think of that I'm aware of, and I acknowledge His presence, and I ask Him to guide the prayer time. So we'll go to length of visit. So I remember taking a course that the teacher said a hospital visit should be no more than 10 minutes. And I agree with that on some level. If somebody's in a lot of pain or nauseous or hooked up to whatever, I go in, I might not even have a conversation, just hold their hand, pray with them, and leave. But then there's the person who is sitting fully clothed in the chair, just waiting for their blood to thicken up so they can have an operation in 2 days. They're going to want a little bit more than 10 minutes of time. And so, you use your judgment. You can read people when it feels like enough's been said. That's when I usually ask if there's ways that I can pray for them, and then we go to prayer. I've already visited someone in a nursing home, and I was there just a few minutes, and she said, "Well, thank you for coming."
Been there.
So I tried to stretch it out a little bit more, and like a couple minutes later, "Well, thank you for coming." So I took my cue.
And then later she wonders why nobody came to visit.
Yeah. And then there'll be people that if you stay 3 hours, it's not long enough.
Yeah.
That's us.
Are you leaving?
Oh, must you go so soon?
Yeah, 2 hours past lunch.
So,
Small price.
It's about them, it's not about us.
That's
It's
That's
about
right.
them. We even had one where we visited a woman, and I think it was like somewhere between 4 to 6 weeks till we went back, and man, did we get scolded. Where were you?
We got
Yeah. Yeah. So you finally came back. Okay. Yeah. So,
and so I generally, when I visit someone in a nursing home or in their home, if they're going to be starting treatment or are receiving treatment and it's an off week for treatment and they're feeling okay, I generally visit about an hour. It kind of amazes me from having done so many visits. I can almost tell when an hour's up, and like I'll get in my car and it's like, yeah, that was an hour. But I really try not to wear my watch. And if I do wear my watch, I really try not to look at it, because even if I'm talking to you and
they noticed that.
Yeah.
that can
Yeah.
be picked up pretty
Yeah.
easily. So you don't want someone to feel like
Yeah.
you're finished and they're not.
You can usually
Like,
tell.
excuse me, you got the time?
You usually can tell if the person's tired, they start to
Yes.
yawn, or
Right, yes.
if they just start to drift away and
Yeah.
can't hold their attention. Then
Yeah.
you just play it by ear, right? Is that what you do? You just
Absolutely.
each person, each visit's different.
Right. And so with Peg, who I mentioned earlier, I think I'm going to visit her maybe once every 2 weeks instead of once a month, but then I won't stay the hour like I would have in the past. So I just feel like she...
Shorter visits more often.
Right.
Yeah, just so they get company.
Right.
Mhm.
So it depends on the situation. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about, time for a visit. So if someone's expecting surgery, something maybe a little bit more than an ingrown toenail, I would check with them about their preferences. I would ask them if they wanted to be on our church prayer chain. Did they want me to come and visit? If I go to the hospital, if they want me to come in and pray with them before their surgery, I try and time it so if their surgery's at 7:30, to get there 45 minutes before the surgery time, because there's going to be one window of time in there for about 5 minutes that nobody's doing anything, and then they'll call you back to visit. So that's really work for me to shoot for the 45-minute mark before a surgery. So what types of situations do you think you will be making visits? Like, do you see yourselves going to someone who's grieving, visiting that way, or hospital visits, or senior members?
I know Pastor Nick and I, we do all of them. Right now, we've been doing all of them.
Uh-huh.
So that's why we decided we wanted to get a visitation team together.
Right,
So
okay. And this is about half of the team?
it's about half.
Okay, all right.
It'll-
You were suggesting that you're doing it once a month.
Mhm.
So is that about the right time frame? Because I know Pastor and I, we do it a little sooner. Sometimes we go once a week
Okay.
to visit some.
Uh-huh.
But if we're putting a visitation team together, we could set them up maybe once a month or so.
Mhm. Yeah, so, and that was senior visitation?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That'd be more like the folks that are in Masonic homes, like they're not necessarily in like a health situation, but they're not able to
Right.
get to church on a
James
regular
Buchanan or
basis.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So have any of you been in a situation where you've had someone come and visit you? Do you have any insights, things that you appreciated or things that you didn't appreciate?
I appreciated a lot of their time, because a lot of them did what you just said, listen, big listener, hear what we're going through. There's times I also had people visit me that all they did was talk about themselves. It was a turn off. So
Right.
then they're the kind you want to go quickly, you act like you're tired or something, but.
Right.
I think one of the things that I've noticed too is like when you go to visit somebody, if there's an obvious problem, like they're dealing with a loss or like an amputee or something like that, not to ignore it, not to pretend like that doesn't exist, because that's our whole world right now.
Yeah.
So being willing to engage it, but carefully. Like, I mean, it's
In a loving way, yeah.
right. Somebody once told me that you think of it like going over to someone's house, and when you knock on the door, they may or may not invite you in. They may or not even answer it. If they answer it and they invite you in, you don't run to their bedroom and go through their closet. You stay in the foyer where they invited you in. And then if they invite you to sit down on the couch in the living room, then you go to the living room too. And so you can knock on the door, but just pay attention to how they choose to answer the door that you're knocking on and take your cue from them.
So, oh, go ahead.
With my sister-in-law, I've been taking her for cancer treatments, and she's had cancer for about 5 years. And her sister used to go with us, but that kind of stopped because her sister, we wouldn't even get out of the parking lot, and her sister would be on the phone calling the pastor and different family members. And it's so important. That is the person that has cancer. They need to be the ones to tell their family or whatever.
Right.
First. You don't need to
Right.
be telling anyone anything.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. And I did learn that one the hard way. I did a visit before I was on staff. And then I was in a setting where somebody asked me about how the woman was doing, and I told her, and it got back to her husband, but it was kind of the whisper down the lane. What got back to him was not even what I had said. And then he came to me and he said, I would appreciate you not sharing my wife's details. And so, yeah, absolutely.
When we do visitation, generally, we don't make the assumption that people even want to be on the prayer chain. So as you visit with somebody, ask them if they would like this to be on the prayer chain. And then sometimes what I'll do is I'll kind of sit there with them.
I know I've visited people that had lost husbands or wives, and they always told me it's so hard for people to be comfortable with them. They don't know how to approach them. And I go, why? And they said, well, they treat you different. They don't know what to say or what to do for you. And I said, I don't understand that, because I just get right up to people. And I found it true. I found people saying, if you ever need anything, let me know, and they never come back. And that's the worst thing you can do to somebody, is to make a promise and not follow up, because they don't know where to turn, where to go, and the emptiness is what is the lonesome, and it just hurts them. They want people to come to them. They want people to talk to them.
She particularly had a woman she worked with, not particularly a friend, and she lost her husband, and everybody did that to her. So Linda called up and made friends with that. We're like, best friends. I mean, she's not sick or in the hospital or anything, but she lives in Delaware. We went down there to visit her there. But you know what I mean? Now she has a friend we call.
But that was awkward for her too. She had people promising to do things and never came. And it's easy to say to someone when they're grieving, if there's anything I can do, please call. A person's not going to call and say, hey, I just need some me time. Come over and take me to lunch. And that's what I did with her. I didn't know her well, but I knew she was hurting just from her words. And I called her up and I kidnapped her. And I just took her away for the day, and we just did a girls' day. She didn't.
So,
I heard a
but-
big thing with, like if someone loses a loved one,
Mhm.
we might naturally tend to not use that person's name in conversation.
Oh,
Yeah, you,
Let's say use it.
no, I
She
use
does.
it.
yeah, yeah.
No, I use
Yeah,
it. I
so if
just.
you write a card, you know,
Mhm.
it's not that the person didn't ever exist, and it's actually very healing
Right.
for that person
Yeah.
to hear you talk about
Mhm.
their loved one.
Yeah.
Well, I
Use
found
their
she
name.
talked a lot because I didn't know them, so she could tell me things I didn't know, and it made her feel good, you know, to tell me about the good things and the bad things, but it was all part of her life.
She had a lot of self-healing too, because like on their anniversary when they went out,
Mm-hmm.
you know, she'd go out by herself and set a plate, and you know, like she was.
Have an anniversary dinner, just her and a
Okay.
plate.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
But you-
So, I have a little activity. So if you would split up into 2 groups. So, does anybody have any questions before we wrap it up tonight?
One that I have is just, you know, sometimes you had said if you go visit an introvert, it could be a really short visit. Is there any, to get the conversation going at first, do you kind of think of some questions before you go into the room, or are there some general questions that you might ask to kind of get the visitation going? If you're nervous about kind of breaking the ice,
Right.
what would you say about that?
Yeah. I've never had like prefabricated questions going in. I think I just,
Take your chances.
I trust God to
Give you the answers. Yeah.
help me know what to say, you know. So the one gentleman that I visited at Masonic Village, I would go in, and he was the classic introvert, and I would go in and he'd have his game shows on, and I'd be trying to talk to him over the game shows.
I won't give them up.
And so what it came down to is I sat with him and we watched game shows. And like we'd watch maybe 2 game shows, and he'd explain them to me because I don't watch these game shows. They're not the game shows I watched as a kid. They're different. So he'd explain them, and you know, we just spent time together, and then
Yeah.
closed in prayer. But when he had had a mild heart attack the night before I went in to visit him one day, and he was pretty upset about that. So I walked in and he turned the TV off, and then he shared a little bit more about that.
You notice they open up more too the longer you become the trust factor, I imagine.
Yeah,
And how
so-
much they'll share with you.
Right, yeah, and he didn't open up a lot, but he shared that he was afraid. And what was really cool was, I asked him if he wanted me to bring communion the next week and invite his wife and daughter, and he said yes. And after that communion, his wife said to me that he changed that day. And she had to ask him what happened, and he's not a great communicator, so he said that he rededicated his life to the Lord that
Good.
day. So, you know, she said from that day on, he was a different person. So that was really
Good.
neat to be a part of.
Yeah. Watch God work in his life
Yeah.
like that.
And because I am an introvert, I'm fine with quiet. That doesn't bother me.
That's not me.
It does.
So,
What about if you're going to visit somebody, and it's a husband and wife team that went into the home, and one's on a different floor and one's in the other. The wife adjusted to the place, is enjoying it. The husband's still miserable, doesn't want to be there, he just wants to complain the whole time you're there. And I don't know if you ever dealt with one of those.
I haven't, but I think what I would try and do is get them together for the visit, like, find, either have her come up with you to visit with him.
Can you do that?
You know, that might help.
Not most of the time.
And even, like if there's a sitting area, maybe it would be good for him